With respect to the crime bill, I think as more Americans focus on the fact that this bill would have put more police on the street, would have locked up violent offenders so they never could get out again, would have given more prison construction money available to the states and as well as the federal government, but also would have dealt with prevention, giving young people something to say yes to. It's a very well thought out crime bill that is both smart and tough. I think Americans are going to say, why these political games? Why are we once again letting certain special interests call the shots in Washington? And we will eventually get a good crime bill like the president has proposed. But it'll just take a little longer than it should have.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, let me begin with a profound remark. 2 + 2 = 4. In other words, there is a logical and rational process called cause and effect. In terms of Newtonian physics, that means that every action causes an equal and opposite reaction. In other words, fellow members of the House, there are reasons why things happen, as controversial as that statement may be. A farmer neglects to tend and care for his fields, it is likely that that crop will fail. A company neglects to invest in research and development, it is likely that that company will not be profitable. In a similar way, a society which neglects, which oppresses, and which disdains a very significant part of its population, which leaves them hungry, impoverished, unemployed, uneducated, and utterly without hope, will, through cause and effect, create a population which is bitter, which is angry, which is violent, and a society which is crime-ridden. And that is the case in America, and it is the case in other countries throughout the world. Mr. Chairman, how do we talk about the very serious crime problem in America without mentioning that we have the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world by far, with 22% of our children in poverty and 5 million kids hungry today? Do you think maybe that might have some relationship to crime? How do we talk about crime when this Congress is prepared this year to spend 11 times more for the military than for education? When 21% of our kids drop out of high school, when a recent study told us that twice as many young workers now earn poverty wages as 10 years ago, when the gap between the rich and the poor is growing wider, and when the rate of poverty continues to grow? Do you think maybe that might have some relationship to crime? Mr. Chairman, it is my firm belief that clearly there are people in our society who are horribly violent, who are deeply sick and sociopathic, and clearly these people must be put behind bars in order to protect society from them. But it is also my view that through the neglect of our government and through a grossly irrational set of priorities, we are dooming today tens of millions of young people to a future of bitterness, misery, hopelessness, drugs, crime, and violence. And, Mr. Speaker, all the jails in the world, and we already imprison more people per capita than any other country, and all of the executions. Can I ask for one more moment, please?
I give the gentleman 30 seconds. We'll run.
All the jails in the world and all the executions in the world will not make that situation right. We can either educate or electrocute. We can create meaningful jobs, rebuilding our society, or we can build more jails. Mr. Speaker, let us create a society of hope and compassion, not one of hate and vengeance. Thank you.
Gentleman.
Mr. Speaker, it is disturbing that the death of Nicole Simpson, a tragedy affecting the rich and the famous, should be necessary to force us to take notice of the horror of domestic violence. Mr. Speaker, 80% of homicides in Vermont involve domestic partners or family members. All of the 6 women slain in Vermont during 1993 died at the hands of an intimate partner or a family member. Nationally, 3 out of every 10 women who were victims of homicide were murdered by a spouse or an intimate partner, and every 15 seconds, a woman is battered by her husband or a boyfriend. Mr. Speaker, we have 17 programs in Vermont that work with victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, and 92% of the people who provide those services are volunteers. These volunteers, most of whom are women, are doing an extraordinary job in counseling and supporting the victims of domestic violence. But they need help. Mr. Speaker, I have a number of serious problems with the crime bill, but one part of it that I vigorously support is the Violence Against Women Act. We urgently need the $1.8 billion in this bill to combat the epidemic of violence against women on the streets and in the homes of America. Thank you. I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to the McCulloch Amendment and, in fact, in strong opposition to this so-called crime prevention bill. Mr. Speaker, let us be honest. This is not a crime prevention bill. This is a punishment bill, a retribution bill, a vengeance bill. All over the industrialized world now, countries are saying, let us put an end to state murder, let us stop capital punishment, but here what we're talking about is more and more capital punishment. What we're discussing now is an issue where some of our friends are saying, we're not getting tough enough on the criminals. But my friends, we have the highest percentage of people in America in jail per capita of any industrialized nation on earth. We've beaten South Africa. We've beaten the Soviet Union. What do we have to do? Put half the country behind bars? Mr. Speaker, instead of talking about punishment and vengeance, let us have the courage to talk about the real issue. How do we get to the root causes of crime? How do we stop crime, which is in fact a very, very serious problem in this country? And Mr. Speaker, I've got a problem. I've got a problem with a president and a Congress which allows 5 million children to go hungry, 2 million people to sleep out on the streets, cities to become breeding grounds for drugs and violence. And they say, we're getting tough on crime. If you want to get tough on crime, let's deal with the causes of crime. Let's demand that every man, woman, and child in this country have a decent opportunity and a decent standard of living. Let's not keep putting poor people into jail and disproportionately punishing blacks.
Time of the gentleman has expired.